The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Nexus Prime. Kang Do-hyun pressed his face against the small window and watched the alien world grow larger below them. Strange purple trees dotted the landscape, and 3 moons hung in the orange sky like giant pearls. "First time off Earth?" asked the woman sitting next to him. Her name was Yoon Hana, and she worked as a translator for the Earth government. She spoke 12 different alien languages and had been to more worlds than Do-hyun could count. "Yes," Do-hyun said quietly. He was nervous. His hands felt sweaty and his stomach kept making odd noises. "I still cannot believe they picked me for this." Hana smiled. "The Cosmic Intelligence Institute does not make mistakes. They invited you because you are the best puzzle solver on Earth." Do-hyun shook his head. He was just a math teacher from Seoul. He liked solving puzzles in his free time, but that was just for fun. The other people going to this competition were geniuses from all over the galaxy. They had huge brains, supercomputers, and thousands of years of experience. The ship landed with a soft bump. Through the speakers, a voice said something in a language that sounded like singing mixed with static. Hana listened and then turned to Do-hyun. "Time to go," she said. "Remember what I told you. Do not stare at the aliens even if they look strange. Be polite. And do not worry if you do not win. Just being here is a great honor for Earth." They walked down the ramp and onto the surface of Nexus Prime. The air smelled like flowers and metal. Do-hyun saw his first alien right away. It looked like a giant crystal that walked on 4 legs. Light moved through its body in patterns that hurt to look at. "That is a Zephyrian," Hana whispered. "They are very smart. Their brains work like supercomputers. More aliens were everywhere. Some floated in the air like colored smoke. Others looked like rocks with eyes. A few seemed to be made of pure energy." Do-hyun tried not to stare, but it was hard. He had seen pictures, but seeing real aliens was completely different. A robot guide led them to a huge building made of white stone. Inside, the walls were covered with symbols and equations from different worlds. The ceiling was so high that Do-hyun could not see the top. Hundreds of beings filled the main hall, all talking in different languages. "Welcome to the Cosmic Intelligence Institute," the robot said in perfect English. "You are here for the annual Stellar Cognition Challenge. This year, 12 species will compete to solve the astral configuration matrix." The robot led them to a smaller room where other humans were waiting. Do-hyun recognized some faces from news reports. Dr. Kim Soo-jin was there. She had written books about alien mathematics. Professor Lee Ji-won had built the fastest computer on Earth. They all looked much smarter than Do-hyun felt. "The competition will begin in 1 hour," the robot announced. "Please use this time to prepare." Do-hyun sat in a corner and pulled out his notebook. It was just a simple paper notebook that he had bought at a store in Seoul. Inside were drawings of puzzles he had solved and patterns he found interesting. Some of the other humans had brought tablets and computers. Dr. Kim had a device that projected holograms in the air. "What is that?" asked Professor Lee, pointing at Do-hyun's notebook. "Just some notes," Do-hyun said. He felt embarrassed. His simple notebook looked silly next to all the fancy technology. Hana sat down next to him. "Tell me about your puzzles," she said. Do-hyun opened the notebook and showed her some drawings. "This one is based on a game my grandmother taught me. You arrange tiles to make patterns. This other one comes from the way water flows through the city." "Interesting," Hana said. "You see connections between different things." Before Do-hyun could answer, the robot returned. "It is time. Please follow me to the competition arena." They walked through long hallways filled with strange art and alien writing. Finally, they reached a massive circular room. The ceiling was a dome made of clear material that showed the stars above. In the center of the room was something that took Do-hyun's breath away. The astral configuration matrix hung in the air like a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light represented stars, and thin lines connected them in complex patterns. The whole thing slowly rotated, casting moving shadows on the walls. "Beautiful," Do-hyun whispered. Around the edge of the room, different species had set up their work areas. The Zephyrians had arranged their crystal bodies in a circle around a device that hummed with energy. The Valkyrians, who looked like giant turtles with extra arms, had brought scrolls covered in ancient writing. A group of beings that looked like metal insects worked with machines that clicked and buzzed. Others that seemed to be made of gas floated around devices that flashed with colored lights. "Each species will attempt to solve the matrix," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The puzzle requires you to arrange the stars according to gravitational laws, quantum mechanics, and interdimensional mathematics. The current record is 6 hours and 12 minutes set by the Andromedans 50 years ago. Do-hyun felt his stomach drop. 6 hours? He had trouble with math homework that took more than 1 hour. How was he supposed to compete with beings who had evolved to be super smart? You may begin, the voice said. Immediately, the other species started working. The crystal beings began to glow brighter as they processed information. The metal insects spread out and started calculating at incredible speed. The gas beings formed clouds around their equipment and began running simulations. Do-hyun just stood there and looked at the matrix. He did not have any special equipment. He did not have a super brain or thousands of years of experience. All he had was his notebook and the puzzles his grandmother had taught him when he was little. "What should I do?" he asked Hana quietly. "What do you always do when you see a new puzzle?" she asked back. Do-hyun thought about it. When he found a new puzzle, he did not start calculating right away. First, he just looked at it. He tried to see if it reminded him of anything else. He looked for patterns that felt familiar, so that is what he did. He sat down on the floor, opened his notebook, and just watched the matrix rotate. He ignored the sounds of the other species working. He forgot about the time limit and the pressure. He just looked at the stars and tried to see what story they were telling. The Zephyrians were already deep into their calculations. Their crystal bodies pulsed with light as they processed millions of possibilities. The Valkyrians chanted ancient formulas while consulting their scrolls. Every few minutes, one of the species would make an adjustment to the matrix, moving a star or changing a connection. But Do-hyun just watched and sketched in his notebook. He drew the patterns he saw and wrote down thoughts that popped into his head. To everyone else, it probably looked like he was not even trying. After an hour, some of the aliens started looking in his direction. He could hear them talking in their strange languages. Hana translated some of their comments for him. "They are wondering why the human is not working," she said. "Some think Earth was invited as a courtesy, not because humans are actually smart enough to compete." Do-hyun felt his face get hot with embarrassment. Maybe they were right. Maybe he did not belong here. But then he looked at his notebook and saw something interesting. The pattern he had drawn looked familiar. It reminded him of something from home. He continued watching and drawing, ignoring the whispers around him. Something was starting to make sense, but he could not quite figure out what it was yet. The matrix kept rotating and the other species kept working. But Do-hyun just kept looking for the pattern that he knew was there somewhere. 2 hours had passed and the competition arena buzzed with intense activity. The Zephyrians were making steady progress on the astral configuration matrix. Their crystal bodies had formed a perfect circle, and streams of light flowed between them as they shared calculations. Vexithara, their team leader, stood in the center directing the work. The lights inside their crystal form pulsed faster as they processed more data. "Gravitational constant for Sector 77 Alpha confirmed," Vexithara announced in their musical voice. "Moving to quantum analysis of binary star systems." The other Zephyrians responded by changing colors, their crystal bodies shifting from blue to purple to gold. They had already mapped about 30% of the star relationships in the matrix. At this rate, they would finish in 4 more hours, fast enough to break the record. On the other side of the arena, the ancient Valkyrian named Morden sat very still. His turtle-like shell was covered in symbols that glowed softly in the dim light. Around him, younger Valkyrians chanted in their deep, rumbling language while consulting scrolls that were thousands of years old. "The stars speak of ancient wisdom," Mordun said slowly. "In the time before time, when the universe was young, patterns were set that still guide the cosmic dance." The Valkyrians worked differently than the Zephyrians. Instead of calculating, they meditated on each star's meaning. They believed that understanding came from wisdom, not just math. Their approach was slower but very thoughtful. Near the far wall, the metal insect beings called the Threx moved like a living machine. There were 50 of them, and they all thought together as one mind. When one discovered something, they all knew it instantly. They had built a complex device that looked like a metal web. Wires connected their heads to the machine, and data flowed between them at incredible speed. "Probability matrix updated," buzzed their leader. 17 million possible configurations eliminated. "Current success chance, 43%. The gaseous Nethek floated around their equipment like colorful clouds. They did not have solid bodies, so they could change shape to fit their thinking. Right now they had formed into complex mathematical symbols that moved and twisted in the air. Their calculations happened inside their gas bodies, where billions of tiny particles worked together. Other species used their own special methods. The cybernetic Corthax had brought quantum computers that hummed with power. The time-sensitive Chronari worked inside special chambers where time moved differently, giving them more hours to think. The energy beings called the Luxari became brighter as they worked, their light forms shifting through the color spectrum. In the middle of all this activity, Do-Yun sat quietly with his notebook. He had filled several pages with sketches and notes, but to most observers, it looked like he was doing nothing important. Some of the aliens had started pointing at him and talking in their languages. Hana translated their comments quietly. The Zephyrians think humans are too primitive for this competition. The Velcarians say Earth was invited to be polite, not because we belong here. The Threx calculate that humans have only a 2% chance of solving even part of the puzzle. Do-Yun felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. Maybe they were right. He was just a simple math teacher from Seoul. These beings had evolved for millions of years to be super intelligent. Some of them had multiple brains, others could think faster than computers, and a few existed partly outside normal time and space. But then he looked down at his notebook and saw something that made him feel better. The pattern he had been drawing looked like something familiar. It reminded him of the tile game his grandmother had taught him when he was 7 years old. In that game, you arranged colored tiles to make pictures, but the trick was not to focus on individual tiles. You had to see the whole picture at once. He also noticed that some parts of the star pattern looked like the way water flowed through Seoul after heavy rain. The streams found the easiest paths between buildings, creating natural patterns that worked with the city's shape instead of fighting against it. "What are you thinking about?" Hana asked softly. "The stars remind me of things from home," Do-Hyun said. "Games, rivers, the way people move through subway stations during rush hour." Hana looked confused. "But this is about gravitational mathematics and quantum mechanics." "Maybe," Do-Hyun said. "But maybe it is about something else too." As the third hour began, the competition grew more intense. The Zephyrians had mapped half of the star relationships and were confident they would finish first. Their crystal bodies glowed brighter as they pushed their processing power to the limit. Bexathara announced their progress to the room. 62% complete. Estimated completion time, 2 hours, 15 minutes. The other species worked harder to keep up. The Threx added more members to their hive mind, connecting 100 insect beings to their calculation web. The Velcarians brought out their most ancient scrolls, texts that supposedly contained wisdom from the first civilizations. The Corthax increased power to their quantum computers until the machines hummed so loudly that other species complained about the noise. The Chronari adjusted their time chambers to run even faster, though this was dangerous. Too much time distortion could damage their minds. But the more frantic the other species became, the calmer Do-Hyun felt. He continued sketching patterns and making notes about what he saw. The matrix was incredibly complex, with thousands of stars and millions of connections. But when he stopped trying to understand every detail and just looked at the overall shape, something started to make sense. "It is like music," he said suddenly. "What?" Hana asked. "The way the stars are arranged. It is like a song with a rhythm. Most of the connections follow a pattern, but some notes are in the wrong places. That is why it does not work." Hana looked at the matrix, then at Do-Hyun's sketches. "Can you show me what you mean?" Do-Hyun pointed to his drawings. "See here? These stars should connect like this, not like that. And over there, that whole section needs to rotate a little bit. It is like when someone sings off-key. The melody is right, but the timing is wrong." Around them, the other species continued their complex calculations. The Zephyrians had reached 70% completion and were confident of victory. The Velcarians chanted louder, calling on ancient wisdom to guide them. The Threx buzzed with excitement as their hive mind found new solutions. But none of them were looking at the puzzle the way Do-Hyun was looking at it. They saw mathematics and physics and complex equations. Do-Hyun saw something simpler, a pattern that wanted to be complete, like a story that needed the right ending. As the fourth hour approached, tension filled the arena. Several species were close to solutions, but none had achieved the breakthrough needed to finish the puzzle. The Zephyrians were still in the lead, but their progress had slowed as the remaining problems became more difficult. Do-hyun continued sketching, ignoring the time pressure and the competitive atmosphere around him. In his notebook, the pattern was becoming clearer. He could see how the stars wanted to be arranged, not because of gravitational math, but because of something deeper, a harmony that felt right when everything was in its proper place. "How much time is left?" he asked Hana. 2 hours, she said. "The Zephyrians think they need 90 more minutes. Do you want to start working on the matrix now?" Do-hyun looked at his sketches one more time. The pattern was almost complete in his mind. He could see how all the pieces fit together, like a puzzle his grandmother might have made. It was beautiful and simple and perfect. "Not yet," he said quietly. "I need to see the whole picture first." The 5th hour was almost over, and the arena felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. The Zephyrians had reached 85% completion, but their progress was slowing down. The remaining star connections were the most difficult ones, requiring calculations so complex that even their crystal minds were struggling. Vexithera's body had turned a deep red color, which meant they were pushing their processing power to dangerous levels. Steam rose from their crystal form as excess heat escaped into the air. The other Zephyrians in the circle were flickering between colors, trying to keep up with their leader's intense pace. "Error in Sector 12 Gamma," one of them announced with worry in their musical voice. "Quantum interference patterns do not match our projections." "Recalculate from base parameters," Vexithera ordered, but their voice sounded strained. For the first time, doubt crept into their confident tone. The Valkyrian elder Mordun had not moved from his meditation position for 3 hours. His ancient shell was covered in symbols that pulsed with soft light. Around him, the younger Valkyrians continued their chanting, but they were getting tired. Their deep voices became hoarse from hours of continuous prayer and recitation. "The cosmic wisdom speaks in whispers," Mordun rumbled slowly. "But the modern mind has forgotten how to listen. We must go deeper into the ancient ways." The Threx hive mind was showing signs of strain too. Several of the insect beings had collapsed from mental exhaustion and been carried away by their companions. The remaining ones buzzed frantically as they tried to process too much information at once. Their metal web device sparked and smoked from overuse. "System overload imminent," their leader buzzed in distress. "Cannot maintain current calculation rate much longer." Even the mighty Korthax quantum computers were overheating. Cooling systems worked desperately to keep the machines from melting down. The energy beings called the Luxari were so bright now that other species had to shield their eyes, but even they seemed to be reaching their limits. In the middle of all this chaos, Do-hyun remained calm. He had filled his entire notebook with sketches and was now drawing on loose pieces of paper that Hana had found for him. His drawings looked nothing like the complex equations and diagrams that the other species were creating. Instead, they looked like simple patterns, the kind of thing a child might draw. "The aliens are getting frustrated," Hana whispered to him. "Some of them are starting to complain that this puzzle is too difficult. A few are saying it might be impossible to solve." Do-hyun nodded but did not look up from his drawing. "They are trying too hard," he said simply. "What do you mean?" "Look at them. They are all fighting against the puzzle, trying to force it to work with pure calculations. But puzzles do not like to be forced. They want to be understood." Hana watched the frantic activity around them. The Zephyrians were recalculating the same sections over and over. The Valkyrians had brought out scrolls so ancient that they crumbled when touched. The Threx had added so many members to their hive mind that the connections were becoming tangled. "It is like trying to thread a needle while wearing thick gloves," Do-hyun continued. "The harder you try, the more difficult it becomes. Sometimes you need to step back and see things simply." He held up his latest drawing. It showed the star pattern as a flowing design, like water finding its way through a landscape. Some areas were dense with connections, others were sparse. The overall shape reminded Hana of traditional Korean artwork, natural and balanced. "This is how the stars want to be arranged," Do-hyun said confidently. "Not because of mathematics, but because it feels right. Like music or poetry or the way trees grow in a forest." Hana looked skeptical, but the matrix is based on real physics. Gravitational forces, quantum mechanics, interdimensional math. You cannot solve it with feelings, Do-hyun smiled gently. "My grandmother used to say that the best puzzles are solved with the heart first, then the mind. When you understand why something wants to be a certain way, the how becomes easy." He showed her another drawing. This one looked like the subway map of Seoul, but with curves instead of straight lines. People think the subway was designed by engineers with computers. But really, it follows the natural flow of the city. The engineers just wrote down what was already there. Around them, the other species were becoming more desperate. The Zephyrians had reached 90% completion, but were stuck on the final connections. No matter how they calculated, the remaining stars would not fit into stable positions. Impossible configuration detected, Vexthara announced with frustration. The mathematics suggest no valid solution exists for the remaining elements. Several species stopped working and stared at the matrix with despair. If the brilliant Zephyrians could not solve it, what hope did anyone else have? But Do-hyun just smiled. He looked at his drawings one more time, then at the slowly rotating matrix above them. In his mind, he could see exactly where each star belonged. The pattern was complete and beautiful and perfect. "I think I understand now," he said quietly to Hana. "The puzzle is not about calculating the right answer. It is about feeling the harmony between all the parts." He pointed to different sections of the matrix. "See how this cluster of stars looks lonely? They want to be connected to that group over there. And these ones here are trying too hard to stay in perfect formation. They need to relax a little, flow more naturally." "But how can you know that without doing the math?" Hana asked. "The same way I know that a song sounds wrong when someone sings off key," Do-hyun replied. "You do not need to calculate the frequency of each note. You just feel when something is not right." With 15 minutes left in the 5th hour, panic was spreading through the arena. The Zephyrians had admitted defeat on the remaining 10% of the puzzle. The Valkyrians were chanting prayers for cosmic guidance. The Threk's hive mind was buzzing in distress as their calculations led nowhere. Some species began to pack up their equipment, assuming that this year's puzzle was simply too difficult to solve. Others continued working frantically, but their movements were becoming desperate and unfocused. Only Do-hyun remained calm. He closed his notebook and stood up slowly, brushing dust off his simple clothes. Hana looked at him with surprise. "Are you giving up too?" she asked. "No," Do-hyun said with quiet confidence. "I am ready to begin." He walked toward the center of the arena where the astral configuration matrix rotated majestically in the air. The other species watched him with curious eyes. Some whispered among themselves, wondering what the primitive human thought he could accomplish when the galaxy's greatest minds had failed. Do-hyun stood before the matrix and took a deep breath. In his mind, he could see the complete pattern, not as a mathematical equation, but as a living, breathing work of art. All he had to do now was help the stars find their way home. The final phase was about to begin. The arena fell silent as Do-hyun approached the astral configuration matrix. Even the machines stopped humming as alien beings turned to watch the simple human from Earth. The massive three-dimensional star map rotated slowly above him, its thousands of points of light casting moving shadows across his face. Vexithara's crystal form flickered with confusion. "The human approaches the matrix, but our calculations show that 87,412 computational cycles are still required to complete the remaining connections." Morden raised his ancient head from meditation. "Perhaps the young being from Earth wishes to attempt the final passages. Though wisdom suggests this is beyond the capability of his species." The Threks buzzed among themselves, their hive mind calculating frantically. "Human neural capacity insufficient for remaining complexity," their leader announced. "Probability of success 0.003%, but Do-hyun ignored their voices. He stood quietly beneath the matrix and looked up at the star patterns floating above him. In his mind, he could see exactly how everything should fit together. It was like looking at a half-finished painting and knowing exactly which colors needed to go where. The matrix interface responded to his presence, allowing him to reach up and touch the holographic stars. Each one felt solid under his fingers, humming with energy that seemed to flow through his hands and up his arms. When he moved a star, lines of connection appeared and disappeared, showing how each change affected the entire system. "Fascinating," whispered one of the Luxari energy beings, their light form pulsing with interest. "The human's bioelectric field is interacting with the matrix in an unusual pattern." Do-hyun began to work. He did not calculate or measure or run simulations. Instead, he simply felt where each star wanted to be. His movements were smooth and confident. like a conductor directing an orchestra or an artist adding final touches to a masterpiece. He reached up to a cluster of red giant stars that had been confusing the Zephyrians for hours. With gentle pressure, he guided them into a new configuration. Immediately, golden lines of connection appeared, linking them to distant systems in a pattern that pulsed with harmonic energy. Impossible, breathed Vexithera. Those stars should not be able to maintain stable gravitational relationships in that configuration. Our calculations proved it mathematically invalid, but the matrix glowed brighter as Do-hyun's changes took effect. What had seemed impossible to pure mathematics felt perfectly natural to his intuitive understanding. He moved to another section, adjusting the position of a binary star system that had been causing quantum interference problems. The orbital mechanics are all wrong, protested one of the Korthak's cybernetic beings. Those stars will collide within 10,000 years at those distances. Do-hyun paused and looked at the artificial being with gentle eyes. They are not meant to orbit forever, he said simply. They are meant to dance together until they become something new. That is how love works. He continued adjusting stars, his movements becoming faster and more fluid. Each change seemed to unlock new possibilities, causing cascades of connections throughout the matrix. Sections that had resisted solution for hours suddenly clicked into place with elegant simplicity. The watching aliens began to murmur in amazement. The Valkyrians stopped their chanting to observe in wonder. The Threk's hive mind buzzed with confusion as their calculations were proven wrong again and again. Even the ancient Chronari emerged from their time chambers to witness what was happening. How does he know where to place each star? Asked a young Valkyrian. He performs no calculations, consults no data, runs no simulations. Morden's wise old eyes sparkled with understanding. Perhaps he does not need to calculate the music to hear when it sounds right. Do-hyun worked faster now, his hands moving in flowing gestures as he rearranged entire star clusters. He moved nebulae like paintbrush strokes, adjusted galactic arms like a sculptor shaping clay, and fine-tuned planetary orbits like a musician tuning an instrument. With each change, the matrix became more beautiful. The random scattered points of light were transforming into a masterpiece of cosmic art. Spirals emerged where there had been chaos. Balance replaced discord. Harmony flowed through connections that pulsed with the rhythm of universal music. 60 seconds, Do-hyun said quietly to himself, feeling the puzzle's completion approaching. Just like grandmother's tile game, when you see the final picture, the last pieces fall into place by themselves. He reached for the final cluster of stars, a group of ancient pulsars that had refused every attempt at integration. The Zephyrians had spent 2 hours trying to fit them into the pattern. The Valkyrians had consulted prophecies dating back millions of years. The Threks had assigned their entire hive mind to the problem. Do-hyun simply smiled and moved them gently as if he were tucking children into bed. The pulsars settled into their new positions with a soft musical tone that resonated through the arena. Golden lines of connection blazed to life, linking them to every other part of the matrix in a web of perfect harmony. 73 seconds, announced the arena's computer system. Matrix configuration complete. All systems in optimal harmony. Solution verified and confirmed. The entire matrix blazed with golden light that filled the arena like sunrise. The star pattern rotated slowly, showing its perfection from every angle. What had been a scattered puzzle was now a unified work of art that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the universe itself. The arena erupted in chaos. Aliens of every species stared in shock at what had just happened. The greatest puzzle in galactic history had been solved in just over a minute by a simple human who had used no technology, no calculations, and no special abilities. Vexithara's crystal form dimmed to almost transparent as their disbelief overwhelmed their processing systems. Our computational models indicated this configuration required a minimum of 4 billion calculation cycles. The human completed it with zero mathematical analysis. The Threk's hive mind buzzed so loudly with confusion that several nearby species covered their hearing organs. Does not compute. Solution achieved through non-logical methodology. Request explanation of human cognitive process. But Morden slowly rose from his meditation position, his ancient eyes bright with wonder. He approached Do-hyun with movements full of respect and bowed his great head low. You have shown us something we had forgotten, the old Valkyrian said softly. That the universe is not just mathematics and physics. It is also poetry and music and love. You solve the puzzle not by calculating what should be, but by feeling what wanted to be. Do-hyun smiled modestly and bowed back. My grandmother always said that the hardest puzzles are solved with the heart first, then the mind. The stars were not trying to hide from us. They were just waiting for someone to listen to their song. The golden light from the completed matrix continued to fill the arena, and for a moment every being present felt a touch of the harmony that Do-hyun had discovered. In that light, they glimpsed what the universe looked like when seen through human eyes. Not as a machine to be calculated, but as a living work of art to be felt and loved and understood. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The news of what happened at the Cosmic Intelligence Institute spread across the galaxy, faster than light itself. Within hours, every major world knew that a human had solved the impossible puzzle in 73 seconds. Within days, the story had become legend. Dr. Jan Mirai, the director of the institute, called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime. The golden light from Do-hyun's completed matrix still filled the competition arena, and many delegates took detours just to see it with their own eyes. We have witnessed something unprecedented, Dr. Mirai announced to the assembled crowd. For 300 years, the Stellar Cognition Challenge has tested the intellectual capabilities of our member species. Never before has any being solved the puzzle in under 6 hours. The humans solved it in 73 seconds. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some species expressed amazement, others disbelief, and a few demanded that the results be investigated for possible cheating. But the evidence was clear. Dozens of recording devices had captured every moment of Do-hyun's solution. Vexithara stood to address the council, their crystal form still flickering with confusion. The Zephyrian Collective requests an explanation. Our computational analysis shows that the human performed no mathematical calculations. He utilized no quantum processors, no probability matrices, no logical algorithms. By all known standards of intelligence, his approach should have failed. That is exactly the point, Dr. Mirai replied. The human succeeded precisely because he did not use our known standards of intelligence. He demonstrated a completely different way of understanding complex problems. She activated a holographic display showing brain scans taken during the competition. While other species showed intense neural activity in areas associated with calculation and logical processing, the human's brain was active in regions linked to pattern recognition, emotional processing, and artistic appreciation. The assembly buzzed with discussion. For millions of years, galactic civilization had assumed that intelligence meant the ability to calculate, analyze, and process information logically. The idea that feeling and intuition could solve complex problems challenged everything they thought they knew. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Do-hyun had become the most famous human in history. News crews from across the galaxy requested interviews. Universities offered him prestigious positions. The Earth government wanted to make him an ambassador, but Do-hyun turned down most of the offers. He returned to his simple apartment in Seoul and went back to teaching mathematics at the local school. The only change he made was accepting a part-time position as a consultant for the newly created Institute for Intuitive Problem Solving. Why do you not want fame and fortune? Hana asked him during one of their regular conversations. She had accepted a position on the Galactic Council for Cognitive Sciences and was now one of the most important humans in interstellar politics. Because that is not why I solved the puzzle, Do-hyun replied, sipping tea in his small kitchen. I did it because the stars asked me to help them find their way home. Fame and money cannot help me hear their songs better. His words were recorded and broadcast across the galaxy, where they were studied by philosophers and scientists on 1,000 worlds. The concept of listening to the universe became a new field of research that attracted beings from every major species. The Zephyrians were among the first to request cultural exchanges with Earth. Despite their initial skepticism, they were fascinated by human approaches to problem solving. Teams of crystal beings came to study in human schools, learning about art, music, and poetry alongside mathematics and science. We have spent eons perfecting our logical processes, Vexithara explained during their first visit to Seoul. But we never considered that logic alone might be incomplete. Your species has preserved something we lost long ago, the ability to feel solutions rather than calculate them. The Valkyrians, with their ancient wisdom, were quick to understand the implications. Morden himself traveled to Earth to meet with Do-hyun and learn about human intuitive methods. "Your grandmother was wise," the old being told Do-hyun as they sat in a traditional Korean garden. "In our earliest texts, we speak of a time when knowledge came through harmony with the cosmos. Perhaps your species has kept alive what we thought was merely myth." Educational programs began to spring up across the galaxy. The Threks modified their hive mind techniques to include emotional processing. The Korthaks added artistic modules to their quantum computers. Even the energy beings experimented with feeling-based approaches to problem-solving. But the most significant change came at the Institute itself. Dr. Mirai established a new department dedicated to studying what she called harmony-based intelligence. The goal was not to replace logical thinking, but to combine it with intuitive understanding. "We are learning that the universe is too complex for any single approach to comprehension," she explained to reporters. "Logic and calculation are powerful tools, but they work best when guided by wisdom, empathy, and an appreciation for beauty." Do-hyun's influence extended beyond academic circles. Artists across the galaxy began incorporating human aesthetic principles into their work. Musicians studied Korean traditional songs to understand harmonic relationships. Architects designed buildings that felt right rather than just functioned efficiently. The puzzle itself became a pilgrimage site. Beings from across the galaxy came to see the golden matrix that still rotated in the Institute arena. Many reported feeling a sense of peace and understanding when they stood beneath its light. Some claimed they could hear the music that Do-hyun had felt. 1 year after the competition, Do-hyun received an unexpected visitor. A small spacecraft landed near his school, and out stepped a young being he had never seen before. They looked like a cross between the crystalline Zephyrians and the energy-based Luxari, with a form that shifted between solid and light. "I am Kesara of the Deep Void Explorers," the being said in surprisingly good Korean. "My people live in the space between galaxies where normal physics do not apply. We have heard of the human who solves problems with his heart. We have a puzzle that has confused us for 10,000 years. Will you help?" Do-hyun smiled and invited the being in for tea. As they talked, he learned that Kesara's people had discovered something in the deep void, a structure or pattern that seemed to exist outside normal space and time. Their most advanced thinkers had studied it for millennia without understanding its purpose. "We have calculated every possibility," Kesara explained. "We have analyzed its quantum signatures, mapped its dimensional parameters, and modeled its probability states. But we still do not know what it is or why it exists." Do-hyun listened carefully, then asked a simple question. "What does it feel like when you are near it?" Kesara paused, their form shifting colors as they considered the question. "It feels lonely, like something waiting for a friend to come home." "Then perhaps," Do-hyun said gently, "it is not a puzzle to be solved, but a being to be comforted." Within a month, the Deep Void Explorers made contact with the cosmic entity they had been studying. It turned out to be an ancient intelligence that had been waiting eons for someone to simply say hello. The first successful communication between beings from different universes happened not through advanced technology, but through compassion and understanding. As news of this breakthrough spread, Do-hyun found himself at the center of a quiet revolution in how galactic civilization approached the unknown. Instead of immediately trying to analyze and categorize new discoveries, exploration teams began to include harmony specialists, beings trained to feel and empathize with whatever they encountered. But through it all, Do-hyun remained humble. He continued teaching children in Seoul, showing them how to solve puzzles with their hearts as well as their minds. He grew a small garden where he practiced the patterns his grandmother had taught him, and sometimes on clear nights he would sit on his roof and listen to the songs the stars were singing. "The universe is not a machine to be figured out," he would tell his students. "It is a friend to be understood, and friends always help each other find their way home." His words became a new philosophy that spread across the galaxy, changing how countless species understood their place in the cosmos. The boy from Seoul who had solved a near-say impossible puzzle in 73 seconds had given the galaxy something far more valuable than a solution. He had given them a new way to see the universe itself, and in that new vision, every being, no matter how different or strange, had the potential to hear the harmony that connected all things. They just had to remember how to listen with their hearts.